I'm Jo Lynn Higgins, RCSC Communications and Marketing Coordinator.
And I'm Bill Pearson. I'm on the board, the rec board, as a director for the Rec Centers of Sun City, which is the acronym for RCSC. Unique is probably the best word, because for the vast majority of people that either don't live here or visit here, they've never seen anything quite like it. The best description I've ever seen of Sun City was that it has a horizontal organizational table. And of course, when you first hear that, you kind of go, huh? But if you think in terms of what you're familiar with, everything in our lives is vertical. If it's from school to our parents, to the military, to politics, everything fits in a pecking order from top to bottom. In Sun City, we don't have a top to bottom. We have simply a horizontal line that was built where a dozen different organizations or more each fit into the spectrum of that horizontal line and fill a niche. And the niche then serves whatever purpose the organization was built to fit, which is, so people come here and they go, huh, how does that work? And until you actually see it up close and personal, it's very difficult to explain, because there's nothing else to compare it to or liken it to in their lives.
So much of the activity here is driven by the people. It's all driven by the people. Clubs fail if no one comes to them, if no one steps up to the plate and volunteers to help keep things going. And that's why it's integral that we have both pieces for the activities and the culture and the lifestyle to continue here. It doesn't happen in a nutshell. RCSC can't make it all happen. It's the people that make it happen.
One of the guys that died here a couple years ago dubbed the tag City of Volunteers. Well, from its origins in 1960, when I first opened it, there was always been volunteers. Today, volunteerism is a little more challenging because a lot of the population moving here are still working. You know, societally, we've been impacted clearly by the changes that have taken place. I mean, if you go back to the history of the Web Corporation, DevCo, that built Sun City, part of the decision to build it was predicated on the fact that defined benefit plans were exploding on the scene in the late 40s and early 50s and all through the 60s. They understood that people were going to be able to retire with a pension plan and Social Security and whatever private savings they had, which was going to set Sun City up to become successful. The experts said it wouldn't work. They said, this isn't going to happen. People aren't going to leave their kids. In the 60s, people didn't leave their kids and moved to the middle of the desert with nothing around them. And so it was actually dubbed the Great Social Experiment by most of the writers that wrote about Sun City. And the rip on Sun City has always been, well, yeah, but all you care about is yourself. You're a bunch of selfish old people. And so I always chuckle at that, because literally, and I mean this, millions and millions of hours are donated inside Sun City for the common good of the community. Now, is that selfishness? Or is that saying, we can take care of, you know, we can get our arms around this, put on a bumper sticker that says, save the whales. Stop world hunger. That doesn't fix world hunger, and it doesn't save the whales. It just makes me feel good. Here, I can get up every day and do something and make a difference in a person's life. Now, not 1,000 miles away, but 2 miles away. Sun setting on Sun City. Great question. Because if you think that we had actually in the 60s an explosion of defined benefit plans and social programs that allowed people to retire, the converse was now true. Those plans were going away. People's savings, 401ks, whatever was the next saving grace for workers actually turned out to be somewhat of a boondoggle. And so consequently their speculation was that people would never retire. They just work until they drop. And so Sun City would fall out of favor. I argued then, as I would argue now, certainly less people are going to retire, but the advent of these kinds of age-restricted communities, hundreds, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1,000 of them today in the country, certainly lend credence to the fact that they're always going to be popular. The question becomes, what can you afford? And in many cases, people move here today still working, but they want the amenities. They want the cleanness of the community. They want the safety of living within walls, though we're not gated. They want living with people of like mind, like values, like beliefs. And so Sun City will always have a place. The challenge for us, of course, is to make the place the kind of place they want to come. And again, societally, we've got some problems that have occurred that have kind of deteriorated a sense of community. Again, if you think about the internet and cell phones and the little cameras on the top of your computers and email, we stay connected to the people because nobody was born here. I mean, in Sun City, we all moved here, right? So we came from somewhere, and it could be from Peoria, but you still have that circle of friends back wherever there was, and you can still stay connected simply with a phone call. If you think about 1960, if you moved here from somewhere else, that phone call was going to cost you, $1.10 a minute or whatever it was back in those days for a long-distance call when we were all terrified of long-distance calling charges. There was no emails. There was no connectivity. So what happened was when you bought in Sun City back then, you had to get to know your neighbors or you had no relationships that had been born over 30 or 40 years of living next door to Joe and Ethel. And so interestingly enough, that fact alone has started to break down that sense of community. And it wasn't anything anybody planned. It was truly something that just happened because that's how we grew up in the last 20 years, where that technology had superseded the need to have friends. And so that's a bit of a problem for us. What we've started to do here, and what I find is so exciting about the RCSC, we took a page out of those early years. If you look back at John Meeker, and so John Meeker came in '65 and replaced the three guys that were running the community and said, we're getting rid of individuality. We're going to start building a sense of community with the clubs, with the organizations, by bringing people together, free events. We're going to help create a sense of community. We're going to get you to know your neighbors. The posse is going to be out there making sure that you're helping. The pride is going to go out and pick up the streets. You're going to get to know people in a social setting. And so he really defined sense of community by the things that he did. And the outcome was absolutely brilliant. From 1968 to '78, they sold 2,000 homes a year. People moved here and absolutely had to start talking to their neighbor. It was just part of the ingredient that was inbred in the community. So again, fast forward now to 2000, 1990, 2000, 2005, all of the new technologies start to build the walls up higher. And so we've made a conscious decision, recognizing the success of 1960 and 70, that for a community like ours, 43,000 residents, 7 miles long, 3 miles wide, to make it be as successful as it was, we had to go back to that sense of community, creating a sense of belonging. And it was fascinating because I walked in the wood shop, and I don't do woodwork, but I knew 4 of the people when I walked in the door. Hey Joe, hi Bob, how are you? It's just what happens. The more you're out and about, the more you interconnect with people, the more closely you become to knowing somebody on a first name basis, which is an oddity. In a lot of communities, you know your neighbor's right next door, but do you know anybody else?
Right.
And so that ability to make contact with people at an eyeball to eyeball level is so important to a sense of community, of making people feel good about where they are and what they are and who they are. Because obviously age-restricted communities get their dictate from federal statutes. The federal homeowners, whatever the law was in '85, allowed us to set up a different set of rules than what you'd find elsewhere. So we have an interest. There's clearly homeowners associations that are under attack, and in some cases rightly so. So any kind of activities down at the state legislature clearly directed at homeowners associations or community laws impacting communities we pay attention to. And when we need to, we make our viewpoints known and our voices heard, and have been fairly successful. In last year there was some issues over the rates that were going to be charged for water and electric, and we held hearings here, and they came in from the various agencies. And when we pack an auditorium with 1,500 people in settings where they usually get 15, they sit up and take notice. So we know when it's time to rally people and get people involved. And clearly pocketbook issues are some that we get involved with. I've come to realize that I can't change much no matter what happens out there. Inside these walls, I can affect just about anything if I'm willing to put my hand up and say, I can do that. I can do that. But for most people to think that they make a difference because they vote or because they send, a party $100, thank you very much. I want to spend my time and my energy and my efforts in places that I know are going to have an impact. And so I'm never shy about telling people that if you really care about making a difference, right here. From a political perspective, I mean, think about where we are in the pecking order in that vertical, right down here. In the horizontal, every one of us is right either on the surface or just a breath below it because they haven't gotten involved, but they could. And so the difference, the opportunity to be effective or have an impact in this community is tenfold what it is outside. Well, first off, and again only because I pay attention to age-restricted communities across the country, they have been less impacted by the downturn in the economy over the last 3 or 4 years. Again, there are a lot of reasons for it. Typically the people that have bought here in the past, I'll preface that, have come here and either bought their home and paid cash for it or have very low payments because they sold the property back there and bought in and took a small mortgage. And we've managed to contain cost in the community really well. So people that move into Sun City in many cases are better off than other places. But with that said, there are a lot of people that have bought here because they saw it as a cheap place to live. Back in 05 and 06 when property values were very high. And so the housing bubble that has crushed most of the country has affected us. I mean, there's a lot of people out there upside down in their mortgage. Their monthly net at the end is in the minus position. 62, 64, 66, 75 years old. The opportunity to go back out into the workforce and get a job isn't as likely as it was many, many years ago. And they're still on that fixed income, so it's problematic. So we would be foolish to sit here and pretend that it didn't affect us, but in comparison to virtually, Peoria, Surprise, Glendale, any place else in the country, on a level where everybody else is here, we're here. So I mean, that's the good news. The bad news is it's still affected us, and we recognize there's people in this community that are struggling. Banner Hospital, the old Boswell Hospital, now Banner, has a foundation that helps fund Olive Branch Senior Center. Olive Branch Senior Center is down 2 miles down, and they feed hundreds of people every day, hot lunches. There's probably a half a dozen organizations within the walls that are there just to help people, elderly, who have a particular need.